So around the 1880s, European powers descended upon the African continent in order to find a place in the sun for themselves. And they proceeded to tear apart each territory into their own colonies, and the subsequent destruction of cultures and resources came as a result of this social Darwinist theory that it was their responsibility to go and civilize this heart of darkness, as they say. And that social Darwinism comes from Enlightenment theories from the 17th and 18th centuries. And ultimately, in the span of 30 years, all of Africa except for Liberia and Ethiopia had been colonized by European powers. And many of the reasons why they decided to go to Africa were, one, extraction of resources, which they did really well. It's the empirical mandate. Another reason would be strategic location of bases, of military presence. But one of the ramifications of this exercise, I know that's a light way of putting it, was the arbitrary placement of these borders all over Africa that meant nothing to the nations that resided there. And when I mean nothing in the sense of arbitrary, they were just randomly placed in regions where on one side would be one family, and that same family would have its remnants on the other side. And the implications of that are felt to this day, and I didn't personally come to understand the impact of that until my recent trip to Guinea. So this is my last episode for Motherland, and the focus is on borders. You know, I did my 23andMe, came to the realization, and this is like a conservative estimate, and I know a lot of people would be like, they're gonna have all your information, they're gonna send it to the CIA. I wanted to know my history from a genealogical perspective, and apparently I'm about 8% North African, most likely Morocco, from what my grandfather has told me, and about 89 or 88% Sub-Saharan African, with 86 or so, if not a little bit more, being the Senegambian region. And this Senegambian region is where, you know, it's not hard to discern, but Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea, and Liberia, Sierra Leone, these regions are situated. And I have family in every single one of these countries. So it's sometimes hard for people to ascertain where my origins are, especially if I'm constantly talking about a different country every other day. Today I'm Senegalese, tomorrow I'm Guinean. But it all comes to the notion of being a Fulani. And the Fulani tribe is nomadic by nature. They left East Africa and migrated across the Sahel to West Africa. So you will find people that I'm related to in Nigeria, in Niger, in Benin, in Togo, in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, in Senegal, in Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau. All that to say, the arbitrary placement of borders has disintegrated the unity that these individual states had. And I'm not Pollyannish, and I don't subscribe to the notion that everything was a state of nature and peace, some kind of noble savage. Nations fought before the Europeans came. But the question at this point is, how do these countries move forward? And I feel that the placement of these arbitrary borders has become the primary cause of friction and fractioning in the region. The manner in which this idea started kind of creeping up in me was as a result of a close family member, my aunt, passing away in the United States, but that side of the family grew up in Ziguinchor, were born in Ziguinchor, which is a southern part of Senegal. My cousin and I decided to go to the funeral. She was being flown from New York City, And it would give us an opportunity to grieve the loss of a family member, but also to see other parts of my family I hadn't seen in close to 15 years or so. And we traveled on a long, circuitous road, partially paved, partially full of just red dirt that just clogged up every orifice of our vehicle. And, this is my first time driving through a border in West Africa, and it's just a nightmare. In the local area, so in the Guinean side, there's 3 different places that you need to pass and spend a little bit of money to make things a little easier for you. So these rent-seeking behaviors, where people try to extract value. I mean, you can talk about corruption from a higher perspective, but on the lower level as well, the bureaucratic nightmare of trying to cross a border took us maybe 3 hours just to do that. Not because there was a lot of traffic. Trucks were lying on either side of the road, but going from the judicial police to anti-drug and then customs and then all these other nightmarish things where there's barely anybody there. And then once you get on the other side, now you got to go through the Senegalese border system, and that's another 3 different steps. And then you're being extorted, especially if you don't sound like everybody that's there. I mean, the experience I had there, I had like a border agent just insult Guineans, for not having the same level of, let's just say it wasn't very diplomatic. All that to say, I had to arrive in Ziguinchor in time for the burial of my aunt, so I behaved. We crossed the border, and then for the next day, well, day is an exaggeration, but I mean, travel day, everywhere I went up until Ziguinchor is pretty much Fulani-speaking individuals, right? People of my ethnicity. And it was just amazing to see that even though this is another country, it just felt like home. Obviously, there's a Senegalese aspect to it. There's the Senegalese flag, and the infrastructure is a little bit different. More fluid. We just felt more fluid, is what I'm saying. And we arrive in Ziguinchor, see all my family, we eat a lot of jollof rice, and after the burial, one of my friends that I'd gone to university with lived in Gambia, and he was working in Rome, and he was coming back for the New Year. I think this was around December, and we decided to meet up. So that was the plan. I went to another part of Senegal, just off the coast, called Cape Skirring, a beautiful beach, stunning landscape. The interesting thing about Gambia is this little country that just hovers over the Gambian River. It is wholly dependent upon Senegal for all of its resources. It's a country within Senegal, but it's the same people. Fulani people from Senegal, Wolof people from Senegal, all share the same food, same culture, same history, except that one is colonized by the French and the other is colonized by the British. But it's the same. It's not a monolith, but I think you understand the point I'm trying to make here. With this kind of disintegration, Gambia suffers more from that relationship because they need Senegal for everything, but the systems are a little bit different. It's very inefficient. I go visit my friend Abdul, shows me around Banjul, had some great seafood, hadn't seen him in almost, 15 something years, went to university together, on some many escapades, and then finally returned to Guinea, right before I come back to Canada, I wanted to go visit Sierra Leone, which is right next door. It's like 200 kilometers, 200 to 300 kilometers. It shouldn't take me more than 3 hours. It took us about 6 or 7, mostly at the border again. And and it was even worse than the one going through Senegal, honestly. On both sides, there's still, 3 different levels that I had to go through, and then 3 different levels of government I had to go through on the other side. But then on the periphery, you have individuals who claim to be working for the border, but you don't know. You're in this very bizarro land of, you pay us a little bit, we'll help you get through this, right? Where it's our responsibility to help. You just don't try to make sense of it. And in my mind, I'm just think of this as a toll that you would normally pay if you're driving through, Michigan or Pennsylvania or whatever. Pay the toll and just get through this. And it's just a nightmare. And we arrive in Freetown in the middle of the night. And as we're driving, should have taken a picture of this. You see the lights from the houses, but Freetown is right at the coast, but the landscape is just rolling hills. So you see lights flying in the air as you're driving, because there's really no lights on the streets. It's just from the homes, and and the next morning we see Freetown for what it is, and I'm just overwhelmed by how beautiful this place is. It's nothing that I considered in my mind. Such a great people with a conflicted and complex history. And I'd heard about this beach that my father had told me about, and cousin and I decided to go. It's the number 2 beach, not far from Freetown, which is, I think, maybe 20 kilometers. And I was just blown away that a place like this existed, because the image you have of Sierra Leone and Freetown is just child soldiers, rebels, warfare. And all I found was peace when I got there. Dipped in the water, and the water temperature was perfect. The Atlantic was accommodating. And my whole trip came to an end there as I was sitting with my cousin and just staring out at this lagoon that was made from the beach, and thought back to the trip that I'd experienced over the last 5-6 months, and realized all my favorite moments happened near bodies of water. Going to the island, Casa, leaving the peninsula to go to the islands, the basket of rivers, the basket in Futajalon, waterfalls that I found there, the Fetore in Timbi Medina, the river that my ancestors crossed to find a new home for themselves. Dubreka, the river Sumba, and then finally here in Sierra Leone, in Freetown, the number 2 beach. And I kept thinking to myself, what was it that kept connecting me to these bodies of water? And it kind of connected back to the notion of the borders, the arbitrary borders that were placed in this region, and that my motherland is not necessarily Guinea. All these nations share cultures, share food, share struggles, but these borders keep them separate arbitrarily and feed into a lot of the inefficiencies that arise. And to me, water represents permeability, fluidity, access, and the importance of regional integration for the development economically, politically, socially. in my opinion, that's the direction that these countries should go. There's so much potential, so much beauty. It's only through integrating all these disparate countries that we can move forward, strengthening these institutions as a whole, capitalizing on economies of scale, as opposed to just doing your own thing, falling into this false separation that was imposed upon us dating back to the 1880s. As I stood on that beach, gazing at the vast landscape in front of me, I watched a man ferry someone across the shimmering water. It was a simple act, yet it carried a profound truth to me. In that crossing, I saw more than just a journey from one side to the other. I saw how, like water, we must find ways to fill the gaps that separate us. My motherland, like water, should flow freely, unconcerned by the barriers and the borders imposed. Its nature is to connect, to bind the unbound, and to offer a way forward. This journey back has brought me full circle. This isn't the end of a chapter, but a new beginning, one built on the foundation of where I came from, and the motherland that will always be part of me.